Cannes just wrapped up its 77th edition, ending 11 days of new films from respected filmmakers around the globe. Disclaimer, I was not there, but I've been keeping up with the coverage coming out of the festival for this past week, and there is a lot to talk about. Welcome back to Tris Talks Movies, and today we're doing a comprehensive recap of this year's Cannes Film Festival. And we're going mostly off script for this, so I've got my coffee, got my notes. Also, sorry ahead of time if I butcher any names. There are a lot, and I'm a little worried about it, but let's get started. This is going to be a long one. Day one. We start the festival with the opening film, a French comedy from Quentin Dupieux, The Second Act. This is the opening film of the festival, starring Léa Seydoux and Vincent Lindon. To give you a brief summary, what starts as a love triangle comedy set in a random diner is unveiled to be four actors making the first movie written and directed by artificial intelligence. Reception around this was kind of mixed. Metacritic was 57, Letterboxd at 3.2. I feel like usually the opening film kind of goes down this path. If you don't know, the opening film of Cannes is always like some random French film that is supposed to come out within a few weeks of the festival to theaters in France. Sometimes you'll get something interesting like Annette. Other times you'll get something a little more kind of whatever. Um, and based on reception, it seems like this is one of those times. David Ehrlich for IndieWire, 2.5 stars, writes, if someone told me that Dupieux conceived of, wrote, and directed this film over the course of 72 hours, I probably would believe them. Not a knock, all things considered. Day two is when the real competition begins. And I mean that very literally, this is when the competition films begin. Starting with our first competition film, Wild Diamond. This is a French film directed by first-time director Agathe Reidinger, starring Malou Kabizi, and she got very strong reception in her first film role. This is her debut in addition to the directors. So all things considered, to get their first work into the Cannes competition lineup, that's very impressive. The film is about a young woman who faces the psychological challenges of being an aspiring influencer after a successful audition for a reality TV show. Reception sits at a 64 on Metacritic. Letterboxd looks about in the 3.3 range. Matt Neglia for Next Best Picture, giving the film a 3.5 stars, writes, there is not much new here, but Agathe Reidinger's filmmaking is raw and poignant. Malou Kabizi delivers a vulnerable and fearless debut performance that earns your empathy and adoration. Again, strong notices for the performances and what I'm hearing about the film. It kind of reminds me of Ingrid Goes West, but French. And I don't think that's a bad thing. It's a great film, and this certainly has positive buzz around it. So I'm interested to see more from it. Moving on, we have The Girl with the Needle. This film comes from Denmark, Poland, and Sweden, directed by Magnus von Horn, who previously directed Sweat. It stars Vic Carmen's son and Trine Dyrholm, who is getting, again, very strong buzz out of the premiere. The film is described as a fairy tale about a horrible truth. The Girl with the Needle follows a young, poor factory worker, abandoned and pregnant in post-war Copenhagen, who meets a woman running a secret adoption agency for poor mothers. From there, the film supposedly grows quite bleak as the narrative descends into a sort of hell. Reception for this is the best of the festival so far. We have an 82 on Metacritic, which is great. I mean, for a film that's incredibly strong. So good buzz from the critics. Letterboxd has it around a 3.7 or 3.8, so a little more tame there. But all things considered, this is positive reception and definitely, there's good buzz around this one. Back to Matt Neglia. He writes in his 3.5 star review, Its overwhelmingly bleak narrative is enhanced by striking black and white cinematography and a tension-filled soundscape, leaving the audience gasping and sweating in dreadful anticipation of where this dark film would go next. It feels like the best and worst tendencies of Gaspar Noé and Bellatar have been blended together to create a work that feels both classical and modern. I'm excited to see more from this one. I really enjoy the stills that I've seen from it. I am a sucker for some good black and white cinematography, so I'm excited to see more. Now, moving on, the last big film of the day was Furiosa, a Mad Max saga. This premiered out of competition, so it won't be up for any awards. However, um, I feel like you don't need me to tell you about this film. You know what this is, and it's great, like really great, and I highly encourage you to go see it. I don't know, it kicks ass. Other premieres of the day outside of the main lineup included Faye in the classics lineup. This is a documentary from the US made by Laurent Bouzero. Got kind of mixed reception, but if you are at all interested in Faye Dunaway, this film might be for you. I've heard fans of her generally are liking it. So, if it sounds appealing, might be worth checking out. Elsewhere in the Cinema de la Plage program, we had Stilex and the City. This is an animated film from France and Belgium made by Jean-Paul Guigou and Julien Bergeau. I like the cute cartoony animation style. It seems, kind of fun. The plot is silly, following a caveman who accidentally goes to the future and brings back an IKEA bent key. But reception around this one is decidedly mixed negative. It seems like people aren't really vibing with it. So, um, unfortunately might not, amount to much. Day 3 is when we get kind of our first big competition premiere from an auteur that people have been looking forward to seeing more from, and this is Andrea Arnold with her new film Bird, coming from the UK. You might be familiar with Arnold's previous work if you've seen American Honey or her documentary Cow. But this is her first film in like 8 years. I think it's her first narrative feature in like 8 years. The film has a pretty big name cast. In addition to child star Nikia Adams, Barry Keoghan, and Franz Rogowski both star in the film. All three of them have received high praise, but Nikia Adams actually has perhaps the largest number of notable shout outs, especially for a child performance. So I'm excited to see more from her. A summary of the film: Andrea Arnold returns to narrative filmmaking with a story about a 12-year-old seeking adventure and attention after not receiving it from her father. One of the big ones going into the competition, and reception has been mostly positive. Maybe not as stellar as people wanted it to be. Metacritic sits at a 70, and Letterboxd looks like around a 3.8. Deadline's Joe Utichi writes, Andrea Arnold knows just how to get under our skin. She embellishes the film with fantastical elements, but whether they're really happening or part of Bailey's childlike desperation to believe in anything magical, the film doesn't make clear. But Arnold certainly wants us to know one thing: Bailey will be okay. I think the takeaway, again, maybe not as praised as people wanted it to be, but generally positive buzz. Some people were really won over by the film, and I think the plot seems interesting, especially in how it plays around with the like magical, fantastical elements of Bailey's imagination. So could be interesting. Next up, we have one of the big ones, like one of the really big ones going into the festival. Francis Ford Coppola's Megalopolis, coming from the US and starring Adam Driver, Giancarlo Esposito, Aubrey Plaza, and many, many more. This is Coppola's $120 million self-financed Roman epic 40 years in the making, following a genius artist seeking to launch New Rome into a utopian future amidst a call for change. His opposition, however, the city's mayor, seeks to maintain the city's regressive status quo. It seems like there's a lot more going on this, though, as if we go ahead and skip to the reception. Oh my god, it's divisive. Metacritic sits at a 58, and the letterbox curve looks like this. To say divisive, maybe it's an understatement. It reminds me of, like, Showgirls, in terms of the division around how people are responding to it, even just out of the gate. I don't know where to start, but to summarize some of what I've heard, the film is reportedly big, bloated, crazy, divisive, a mix of all sorts of messaging jumbled within a visually incoherent but sometimes stunning extravaganza with dialogue that sounds like it's from a Roman myth, including a scene in which Adam Driver's Caesar speaks to a live actor outside of the screen. Everyone seems to agree it's a big, contradictory, drug-fueled, messy, overly ambitious shot at the fences, and for some that's what makes the film a masterpiece, and for others that's what makes it a historic misfire. For example, David Ehrlich, 4 stars, writes, "The constant madness of its folly and the occasional disaster of its design serve as conduits for its writer, director, producer, financer's entire creative ethos. Coppola might lack the imagination required to invent the new cinema that his movie so desperately wishes it could will into being, but he's always seen the need for it better and more urgently than any of his contemporaries." By contrast, Matt Neglia, 1.5 stars, writes, "Themes of time, history, legacy, civilization, technology, politics, the media, and economics are all touched upon in this golden, sun-baked, grandiose piece of filmmaking, but with little to zero cohesion between them. Every member of this cast feels lost as they deliver some of the funniest line readings you'll likely hear all year. Some will appreciate its scale and ambition. I would have admired it more if any of it worked, but at least I'll never forget the incoherent, messy, what the fuck experience of it all." So, similar thoughts from both reviewers, but different perspectives on whether or not those things work. Needless to say, I am very excited to see it. I think it is fascinating how divided people are over this, while also sort of being in agreement as to what the film is. So I am interested to see it, to experience it for myself, and to see how I respond to it, even if it seems crazy and no distributor wants to touch it. Other premieres of the day included When the Light Breaks, The Damned, Francois Truffaut, My Life, a Screenplay, On Becoming a Guinea Fowl, an unfinished film, Elizabeth Taylor, The Lost Tapes, The Invasion, Meeting with Pol Pot, My Way, Walking in the Movies, Twilight of the Warriors, Walled In, and the highlights include When the Light Breaks, On Becoming a Guinea Fowl, and an unfinished film. When the Light Breaks comes from Iceland, the Netherlands, Croatia, and France by director Runar Runarsson. The film is seemingly about a young art student processing love, friendship, beauty, and grief against the setting sun of Iceland. The film scored a 79 on Metacritic. YouTube's own Brother Bro writes, "Aileen Hall's performance will surely go down as one of the year's best for me. Striking how well the director is able to capture all the nuances within the experience of sudden loss." On Becoming a Guinea Fowl comes from Zambia, the UK, and Ireland, from director Rungano Nyoni. The official description reads, "On an empty road in the middle of the night, Shula stumbles across the body of her uncle. As funeral proceedings begin around them, she and her cousins bring to light the buried secrets of their middle-class Zambian family." This had strong buzz going in, with A24 picking up the film before its debut, and word is, per another 79 on Metacritic, the film delivered. Robert Daniels, in his 4.5-star review for RogerEbert.com, calls it a magically transcendent, cunningly funny, and arresting piece of cultural commentary that puts the inequalities of tradition against the warmth community can still, on occasions, provide. I've heard great things about the director's previous film, I Am Not a Witch, so this is certainly on my radar. The film also won the Best Director award alongside The Damned within the Uncertain Regard competition. Finally, Luya's An Unfinished Film also catches my eye, but unfortunately I don't think I have time to go over every film, but check it out, learn more about it, it seems cool. 4 was a big day. We start the day with Kinds of Kindness debuting in competition, coming from the USA and the UK. This is director Yorgo Lanthimos' new film, starring Emma Stone, Jesse Plemons, Willem Dafoe, and many, many more. To summarize, this is reportedly a return to Lanthimos' Greek weird wave roots. He has reunited with his The Favorite screenwriter Efthymis Philippou to give us a provocative, sexual, darkly comedic triptych. Reception has been, I think, net positive at a 72 on Metacritic. Letterboxd closer to maybe a 3.6 or 3.7. There's definitely some division here. It kind of off-put some people who were kind of disappointed it was a departure from Yorgo's more broadly appealing last 2 features. It's weird, full of sex, dark, everything that made his earlier work a bit more divisive among general audiences. Iana Murray, a freelance film writer, wrote on Letterboxd in her 5-star review, Yorgos back in sicko mode. The old man next to me got so mad he pushed me out of the way to get the hell out. Again, a bit divisive. That being said, it did ultimately win Best Actor in competition for Jesse Plemons, so look out for his performance. And I think as a whole, I'm excited for it. It seems like a cool film. I know it's coming to theaters this June, so I'll definitely be checking it out. Moving on, though, the next film in competition is Paul Schrader's O Canada. Coming from the USA, the film stars Jacob Elordi, Richard Gere, and Uma Thurman. The official description reads, a famed Canadian documentary filmmaker gives a final interview to one of his former students to tell the whole truth about his life. A confession filmed right in front of his wife. From what I can gather from responses to the film, it seems to explore how the past has informed the present through its parallel narratives of the filmmaker's young and old selves. Now, reception to this, I hate to say, we have yet another divisive film. Metacritic sits at a 58, the lowest of the festival so far, and Letterboxd looks like a 2.6, which is quite bad. It seems like Paul Schrader took a swing to do something new and personal, and for some it worked, and for many others it just absolutely did not. Carson Runquist liked it though, writing in his 3.5-star review, felt way more active in its direction than Schrader's last 2 films. Always knew Elordi would be great in a Schrader movie, but Richard Gere really, really brings it. Feels a bit rushed. The pieces don't all fall into place as nicely as they should. Almost reads like he was holding in so many ideas while making the last trilogy, and this allowed him to open the floodgates. But I'm very into Paul Schrader being this soft and reflective. For others, all of those ideas didn't come together as well as they should have. Neglia, 2.5 stars, writes, O Canada is Paul Schrader's reflective commentary on mortality, art, memory, and regret. So why then does it feel so thin? At a brisk 95 minutes, Schrader's cross-cut narrative between Richard Gere on his deathbed and Jacob Elordi playing the younger version of this character gets lost along the way, dampening its emotional and thematic impact. So we have, again, very divided opinions. Personally, I'm again curious about this one. It seems interesting. I like a little cross-cut narrative. I've heard great things about Richard Gere, and I'm excited to see him return to the screen. And I like the poster. So the third and final film in competition for the day is 3 Kilometers to the End of the World. Coming from Romania and directed by Emanuel Parvu, this stars Bogdan Dumitrak, Ciprian Ciude, and Laura Vasiliou. I'm so sorry if I pronounce those really poorly. To summarize the film, it is a dramatic exploration of small-town homophobia and familial betrayal in Romania. Reception to this has been mixed positive. Metacritic sits at a 61 and Letterboxd at about a 3.3. Muted reception overall, some more affected by its depictions of homophobic violence and regressive familial consequences than others. That being said, filmmaker Lucas Daunt and his jury awarded the film this year's Queer Palm for its contributions to queer filmmaking. Deadline shouts out the performances, with Stephanie Bunbury writing, "The actors bring to their portraits the naturalistic ease combined with intensity that is hallmark of Romanian New Wave cinema, each one a whole person with their own reasons." I'm certainly curious about this film. I am definitely, a supporter of queer filmmaking, you could say. And I enjoy the Romanian New Wave. I think it's an interesting movement. I was kind of turned on to it by Radu Jude's, what was the film called? Bad Luck Banging or Loony Porn, I think is the film. But it was great. I mean, well, I liked it. I thought it was interesting. There's a lot of interesting ideas going into it. So I am intrigued by this film. Other premieres of the day included The Shameless, Holy Cow, Scenarios, The Belle from Gaza, Everybody Loves Tuda, The Surfer, and the highlights are The Surfer, Scenarios, and two shoutouts, The Shameless and Holy Cow. Starting off, The Surfer is from Australia and Iceland by director Lorcan Finnegan, who you might recognize from that Jesse Eisenberg Suburbia movie called Vivarium. This is a thriller in which Nick Cage plays a man who returns to the Australian beach of his childhood to go surfing with his son before being humiliated by a group of locals who claim ownership over the beach. Conflict ensues, stakes escalate, sanity is tested. Seems like a fun time. Some critics were off-put by the extreme places it goes, but most seem to be along for the ride, giving it a respectable 69 Metacritic average. Scenarios from France and Japan feels worth talking about just because it is director Jean-Luc Godard's final film, the French New Wave pioneer behind Breathless, Pierre Le Fou, and so many other films. This is his final work, and it kind of premiered to not a whole lot of attention in, like, what was it? A Con Classic screening. It would feel wrong not to mention it. I may not personally adore all of his work, but it's undeniable what a substantial impact he's had on the art of cinema throughout his career. Scenarios was his final short, his final shot, his final moments, finished a literal day before he passed away. A loose narrative composed of jumbled notes and images, this is in many ways his farewell to cinema. And so we say farewell to Jean-Luc Godard. Finally, the shoutouts. The Shameless, whose Anasuya Sengupta won Best Actress in the Uncertain Regard competition, and Holy Cow, also Uncertain Regard, for winning the Youth Award. Someone is playing music outside my window. That's great. Thank you. Day 5. We are starting off with a big one in Emilia, Perez. Coming from France, this was kind of the first film to receive real Palme d'Or buzz. It ultimately won the jury prize, or third place, but let's talk about the film a bit first. This is from director Jacques Audiard, who you might know for The Sisters, Brothers, or A Prophet, and stars Zoe Saldana, Carla Sofia Gascon, Selena Gomez, and Adriana Paz, all of whom were jointly awarded this year's Best Actress prize. To summarize the film, this is a queer Mexican musical criminal melodrama about a lawyer helping a cartel leader escape from the business so she may transition to living life as a woman. Now, I have a lot to talk about with this film. It's a film that I'm both excited to see and terrified to see. So I wrote down some of my thoughts and I will read those. On one hand, a transgender musical with lots of buzz premiering at Cannes sounds like a dream film to me, but on the other hand, the last time I got my hopes up about a film about transness that was directed by a cis man, I was met with one of the most deeply troubling, sneakily transphobic, and self-congratulatory films I've ever seen. It was The Danish Girl. Don't watch The Danish Girl. What this film has working in its favor is that it does actually star a trans woman in the titular role, but based on what I've heard about the film thus far, I still have reason to be skeptical. While the buzz out of the gate was very strong, hailing the film as the first real Palme d'Or contender of the festival, not everyone was won over by the film. Take these two contrasting reviews from IndieWire's Ryan Latanzio and Deadline's Stephanie Bunbury. Latanzio, 2.5 stars, writes, "You haven't lived until you've seen a movie musical where the words mammoplasty, vaginoplasty, rhinoplasty play out in song. And you've never seen a movie musical at all about transness that takes as bold of swings as Jacques Audiard's Emilia Perez, which is stylistically unforgettable while missing the crucial element that makes any movie musical work: actually good, memorable songs." Bunbury, meanwhile, praises the film's musicality, writing, "None of this ever seems ridiculous because Audiard leans into the musical genre's conventions. Rather than bending his provocative story to fit it, he bends the form itself." Still, as much back and forth as I've seen on this film, the net reception is quite strong. Strong enough for the film to win 2 prizes in this year's closing ceremony. This is certainly one of Cannes' bigger successes this year. It even scored an 8-figure Netflix deal that is reportedly in the works. I'm just curious to see where reception leans on this as more queer film critics get the chance to see it. Again, I'm a little scared of this film, but hopefully it's good. We'll all get to see it later this year, assuming this Netflix deal goes through. I guess we'll see what happens. The next film of the day is Black Dog, which was not a competition film, but in uncertain regard, but I wanted to talk about it because it won the top prize in the uncertain regard competition. Film is from China and comes from director Guan Hu, who you might know for The 800. The film stars Eddie Peng, and to summarize, reportedly containing minimal dialogue, Black Dog follows a young man freshly released from jail who is tasked with clearing his small desert hometown of stray dogs before striking up an unlikely connection with a black dog. The two set off on a new poetic journey together. Reception on this has been quite positive. Again, it won the uncertain regard competition. IndieWire's Christian Zilko scores the film a respectable B, writing, "Depending on how you look at it, Black Dog is either the most violently depraved feel-good animal movie in recent memory, or the most wholesome neo-noir we've seen in a while." I'm excited to see this one. Oh my god, I forgot I have my coffee. This is beautiful. Life is great. That's really good. Okay, next up we have Caught by the Tides. Coming from China, this is directed by Chao Jung-kook, who you might know for directing Ash is the Purest White, A Touch of Sin, and many other Chinese epics. Starring Zhao Tao, the summary reads, "A largely silent, transportive journey from the early 2000s to the present day. Caught by the Tides is a 2-hour portrait of the transformations that have led to present-day China, as told through a love story, in which our heroine must travel through all of Zhangke's previous work to reach her disappeared lover." Reception on this is quite strong from critics. It's had an 80 on Metacritic, but Letterboxd is a little more divisive at maybe a 3.4. Some were left mystified by the experimental vagueness of the film's narrative, while others were swept away by it. Seems like it could be uninviting for newcomers of the director's work, given the premise involving going through his previous films. Variety's Jessica Kyung loved it though, writing, "Chia's risky experiment is so uncannily successful that it is possible to come away from Tides with the whimsical impression that this was the film he was building towards all this time, as though all those lauded previous movies were simply him amassing the raw material for this one." Other premieres from day 5 included Armand, Savages, Jem Henson Idea Man, C'est pas moi, Transmitzvah, Rumors, Once Upon a Time, Michel Legrand, The Balconettes, and the highlights are C'est pas moi, Rumors, and The Balconettes. C'est pas moi is a French film from director Léo Carax, who you might know for Annette and Mauvais Songe. I'm going to read the official description because I kind of love it. For an exhibition that in the end never took place, the Pompidou Museum asked the filmmaker to reply, in pictures, to the question, "Where are you at, Léo Carax?" He attempts an answer, full of questions, about himself and his world. "I don't know, but if I did, I'd reply that..." From what I've read of this film, this is a pretty good way to capture what it is. A self-portrait put to film that uses Kurok's body of work in an attempt to answer this question. Of the film, Arjun on Letterboxd, 5 stars, writes, Leos Carax has been more experimental with form than almost every filmmaker who gets his kind of budgets, but is still struggling with the where do we go from here question that seems to be plaguing a lot of people lately. Cinema used to make miracles and guide audiences with a divine hand. What now, when we all have the power of a camera in our hands? Rumors, coming from Canada and Germany, is a new film from Guy Madden, who previously directed My Winnipeg and The Forbidden Room, alongside Evan Johnson and Galen Johnson. This is a satirical comedy coming from one of Canada's most famous experimental filmmakers. Rumors had a lot of buzz ahead of the festival for being the director's first instance attracting some big talent to his cast, including Cate Blanchett and Alicia Vikander. The film itself follows 7 leaders of the world's most powerful liberal democracies attempting to draft a provisional statement en route to the G7 summit, but they get lost in the woods on the way there. I was excited for this one, but the buzz around it has been decidedly divisive. Letterboxd didn't care for the film much at all, giving it an unattractive ratings curve, with users who liked the film joining a minority. On the other hand, though, the Metacritic score is better than I expected, the film scoring a solid 73 average among critics. Noting the film's general absurdity, Ehrlich, 3 stars, writes, "A giant brain the size of a Volkswagen, ancient bog people who explode when they masturbate, self-effacing jokes about Canada's place in the world. Rumors might abandon the silent film aesthetic that has come to define Guy Madden's singular brand of absurdism, but not even the complete absence of exclamatory title cards is enough to suggest that this ridiculous comedy of manners could have, or would have, been made by anybody else." The Balconettes comes from France from director Noémie Merlant, who you might know as the actress in Portrait of a Lady on Fire and Tar. Winner of the Young Film Technician Prize, Merlant cast herself in a horror comedy about a heat wave in Marseille that leads to 3 roommates meddling in the lives of their neighbors from their balcony before things turn bloody. Co-written with Céline Sciamma, the film seems like a fun time, and most people seem to agree that it was. Shouting out the film's clear adoration of Pedro Almodovar's work, Julian, aka The Film Seeker here on YouTube, writes, "Particularly reminiscent of the maestro of melodrama's earlier, messier features, the Balconettes may as well have been called women well beyond the point of a nervous breakdown, as Merlant's allusions to the Spaniard are so plentiful and forceful that you simply have to appreciate anyone's willingness to revive this particular brand of kitschy comedy thrillers, let alone someone doing it this well." I am very excited to see this film. Final shoutouts of the day go to Savages for looking cool, supposedly being good, and coming from the director of My Life as a Zucchini, and Armand for winning the Camera d'Or. I accidentally closed my notes. I need this. Day 6, starting with Limonov, the Ballad. This film is from Italy, France, and Spain, directed by Kirill Zurbinikov, who made Leto and Petrov's Flu, and starring Ben Whishaw, who drew high praise for his performance. To summarize the film, I should preface by saying that this is a biopic about someone I honestly don't know much about, but this film is a portrait of, quote, revolutionary militant, thug, underground writer, political agitator, and lover of beautiful women, Edward Limonov. I promise I did not add in the lover of beautiful women part. That is actually in the official description. Reception? It's another divisive film. Metacritic sits at a 61 and Letterboxd looks like a 3.2. Many took issue with the film's almost romanticized way of framing the controversial figure's life. Neglia, 3 stars, even compares the film to Joker but set in the USSR. Meanwhile, Jessica Kyung for Variety writes, given all of its omissions and elisions, and the sense of coolness cosplay that permeates this noisy but lifeless film, Limonov might not be a total misapprehension of the mercurial, charismatic, and infuriating Edward Limonov, but it is at least a mispronunciation. I've been mispronouncing his name this whole time. It is Limonov, I think. So maybe Jessica has a point. Moving on, we have, I would say, one of the big films that premiered, a film that Mubi picked up and released a teaser for before it even showed at Cannes. This is The Substance, coming from the UK, USA, and France, and directed by Coralie Farge. This film stars Demi Moore in her return to the big screen, Margaret Qualley, and Dennis Quaid. To summarize, this is a provocative body horror film targeting beauty standards in the entertainment industry, in which a fading celebrity decides to use a black market drug, a cell-replicating substance that temporarily creates a younger, quote-unquote, better version of herself. Now, reception to this has been, let's say, provocative. Initially met with uproarious praise after the premiere screening, immediately generating huge amounts of positive buzz that flooded the internet. The wave of praise coming in from male critics has been met with notable division among female critics, who, unfortunately, due to the inequities within film criticism, make up a smaller portion of the Cannes audience. Ehrlich's 4.5-star review reads, an immensely, unstoppably, ecstatically demented fairy tale about female self-hatred. Coralie Farge's The Substance will stop at nothing, and I mean nothing, to explode the ruthless beauty standards that society has inflicted upon women for thousands of years. A burden this camp-adjacent instant classic aspires to cast off with some of the most spectacularly disgusting body horror this side of The Fly or the final minutes of Acura. This can easily be contrasted with the writing of Hannah Strong for Little White Lies, which reads, the substance regurgitates old talking points about Hollywood's obsession with beauty and fear of aging in a sterile facsimile of Hollywood without adding anything new or interesting to the conversation, and then goes for broke in a third act it hasn't come close to earning. It's certainly a showy movie, and the props team have worked their socks off to bring to life some grim creations, but more than anything, this film felt deeply depressing. A reminder of how Hollywood denigrates anyone who looks a little different from the standard pushed by social media and popular culture. But replicating images doesn't automatically make them subversive, and the substance's execution of its supposed themes is as shallow as the very thing it's critiquing. I highly recommend reading Hannah's full review, but regardless, I'm curious to see where the conversation leans as more female critics have the chance to see the film. I should note again that the negative reception isn't unanimous, Lex Briscuso scoring the film an 8 out of 10 for IGN, but it's certainly worth noting the divided reactions. Regardless, reviews still lean very positive overall, with a Metacritic at 83 and a letterbox that looks around a very commendable 4.2. The film was also awarded the Best Screenplay Award from this year's competition jury. Other premieres in Day 6 include Dog on Trial, My Sunshine, Apprendre or Learn, The Story of Suleiman, Jacques Rosier, From One Wave to Another, Horizon, An American Saga, Lula, The Marching Band, Hayao Miyazaki and the Heron, and the highlights are The Story of Suleiman and Horizon, An American Saga. The Story of Suleiman comes from France and director Boris Lojkin, winner of the Uncertain Regard second place jury prize and best actor for Abu Sangar. The film follows Suleiman, a meal delivery biker, who recounts his story as he pedals through the streets of Paris. In 2 days, he will interview for his asylum application, but he is not yet ready. Strong buzz for this at a 79 on Metacritic. Variety's Jessica Kyung writing, if the hero's dire situation is a ticking clock, Lojkin's intelligent and empathetic film places us right alongside him, with each cog of circumstance and each gear of good fortune grinding against him at every turn. Horizon, an American saga, premiered out of competition and comes from the USA from director Kevin Costner. Coming in with a disappointing 50 on Metacritic, Horizon is worth highlighting more for the backstory of its production than its quality. A 3-hour Chapter 1 for Costner's ambitious 4-part return to the Hollywood Western, a film he's been trying to make for just over 35 years, Horizon chronicles 4 years of the Civil War as families, friends, and foes all attempt to discover what it truly means to be the United States of America. Times' Stephanie Zacharek found the film tame, writing, Horizon, while being at least somewhat culturally sensitive, handsome to look at, and reasonably engaging, still comes off as curiously undistinguished. It's so tasteful, so careful, so eager not to upset or offend, that it reflects little sense of risk. Day 7. The Apprentice. Coming from Canada, Denmark, and Ireland, The Apprentice is directed by Ali Abbasi, who made Holy Spider and Border, and stars Sebastian Stan, Jeremy Strong, and Maria Bakalova. To summarize, this is a biopic with an asterisk, charting a young Donald Trump's rise to power through a Faustian deal with the right-wing lawyer Roy Cohn. This is a searing indictment of Trump's narcissism and the story of how a scumbag lawyer created a monster that even he could no longer control. A couple extra fun facts about the film before we get into its reception. Trump himself is trying to keep it from being released, and one of the film's billionaire investors is trying to do the same after not realizing the film was going to be anti-Trump. Honestly, this just makes me want to see it more. It's kind of funny. As for the reception, we know Trump's conservative circle, unsurprisingly, does not like the film, but what about everyone else? Metacritic sits at a 61, Letterboxd looks like a 3.6 or 3.7, and AV Club's Jason Gorber has plenty of good things to say, scoring the film a B+, and writing, the performances are stellar, the pacing both restrained and engaging, the realization of Khan and Trump's world is top-notch, and the dynamic between the two is as captivating as any. For those able to take the film on its own terms, to be in equal parts fascinated and repelled by the behaviors of those captured therein, The Apprentice stands as a masterclass in observing this compelling, consequential mentor-protege relationship, one that continues to shape global headlines. The Guardian's Peter Bradshaw was less impressed in his 2-star review, citing a seeming inability to go beyond cartoonish satire in writing. Director Ali Abbasi has given us fascinating monsters in the past, but the monstrosity here is almost sentimental, a cartoon xeroxed from many other satirical Trump takes and knowing prophetic echoes of his political future. It's basically a far less original picture. Next up, we have, you guessed it, another divisive film, David Cronenberg's The Shrouds. From France and Canada, and coming from the famed director of Crimes of the Future and The Fly, this film stars Vincent Cassel, Diane Kruger, and Guy Pearce. To summarize, Cronenberg's graveyard horror sees him reflecting on his grief after the passing of his wife in this narrative about a businessman who invents a revolutionary and controversial technology to monitor the dead. When multiple graves, including his wife's, are desecrated, he sets out to track down the perpetrators. Reception, as I said, has been very divisive. The Shrouds has mesmerized some and confounded others. Metacritic sits at a 55, and Letterboxd is at maybe a 2.3 to 2.5. Speaking to the division around the film, Next Best Picture's Josh Parham, scoring the film a 7 out of 10, summarizes nicely the pros and cons of a film that may work for some more than others, writing, much of The Shrouds is fairly indicative of what one would expect from Cronenberg, both the good and the bad. His philosophical ideas are in conflict with their execution, trapped under the weight of a laborious screenplay, struggling to maintain its aura of engagement. It muddies the waters and slows down the momentum to a frustrating degree, yet those themes are also crystallized enough to become part of an enthralling process of discovery. This is one I am honestly excited to see. It sounds fascinating, and I'm interested in some of the division around it because some people are really connecting to the film on a deeply personal, emotional level. What for some seems negatives, for others are the whole point behind the film. And are a big part of what makes it so successful at what it's trying to do. Needless to say, I am curious to see more. I enjoy the stills, I enjoy the actors, I enjoy the director, um, and I'm excited to see what it's all about. Other Day 7 premieres included The Kingdom, Santosh, Ernest Cole Lost and Found, Misericordia, Veteran 2, I the Executioner, and the highlights are Misericordia. Coming from France, Spain, and Portugal, directed by Elaine Giroldi, who directed Stranger by the Lake. I would say, given the director and some positive buzz, I'm somewhat surprised this wasn't a competition title. The film follows Jeremy, who returns to his hometown for the funeral of his former boss, the village baker. Per the description, in this village where so much goes unsaid, he must contend with rumors and suspicion until he commits an irreparable act and finds himself at the center of a police investigation. Letterboxd user Wiso Bandit was impressed, writing, "This has some of the best direction of dialogue I've seen in recent years. Every gaze, every gesture, every movement exists by purpose. It is almost Bressonian in its desire of the exact, and yet it remains a completely vast film." It's certainly on my radar with Sideshow and Janus Films picking it up for distribution. Ooh, how far into this are we? How long is this recording? Day 8. Day 8 starts us off with something I am surprised was in the competition, Marcello Mio. Coming from France and directed by Christophe Honoré, starring Chiara Mastroianni and Catherine Deneuve. To summarize, this is a sort of meta-dramedy about a bunch of real famous French actors, including, again, the ever-transcendent Catherine Deneuve. I love her. She's great. She's in one of my favorite films. Playing themselves in a story in which Deneuve's daughter, Chiara Mastroianni, impersonates her father in an attempt to grow closer to him. The reception has been fairly muted, and I have a feeling this was only in competition as a result of the film's clear adoration of French film culture. Metacritic sits at, I think, the lowest yet with a 47, but Letterboxd is a little kinder, leaning towards about a 2.7. In an unenthused review for The Guardian, Peter Bradshaw, 2 stars, writes, "It's an indulgent doodle of a film, a self-admiring industry in-joke, an earthbound flight of fancy, unconvincing on a literal level, and unenlightening on a metaphorical level." Yet Deneuve, puncturing her daughter's affections and delusions with a wry and bemused smile, injects some real humor. Now that we have Marcello Mio out of the way, we can move on to the, I want to say, biggest film of the festival, the Palme d'Or winner, Sean Baker's Anora. Coming from the USA and starring Mikey Madison, Mark Edelstein, and a very special shout out to my friend Masha Zak, who briefly appears in the film. Anora follows a young sex worker who gets her chance at a Cinderella story when she impulsively marries the son of a Russian oligarch. When his parents find out, they set out for New York to get the marriage annulled. Ehrlich notes in his glowing 4.5-star review that the relentless Coney Island comedy that Baker has seduced from the premise cleaves a hell of a lot closer to Uncut Gems than it ever gets to Pretty Woman. The reception, obviously, is tremendous. Metacritic sits at an 89, and the Letterboxd looks like a 4.3, which is great. IGN selects Briscuso, 9 out of 10, writes, Sean Baker's hysterical and moving Anora serves up its lead character's purity of heart on a silver platter, showing us what it means to be let down just when the world seems so full of possibility. In this frank exploration of sex work, class, and the promises we make and break, the director reaches our souls and reminds us life isn't all it seems to be through a story of outcasts and outsiders. Baker cuts straight to the feeling, and because of his fearless filmmaking, this career-best film, in all its crushing and chaotic glory, demands to be felt. Notably, star Mikey Madison has received glowing praise and Oscar buzz for what is reportedly a star-making role. So I'm really excited to see this film, and I hope it does well this award season, especially, again, since my friend is in it. So I am highly rooting for it. Next up, a return to the division, Parthenope. Coming from France and Italy and directed by Paolo Sorrentino, director of The Great Beauty, The Hand of God, and Youth, starring Celeste Dalla Porta, Stefania Sandrelli, and Gary Oldman. Parthenope is a decades-spanning feminine epic about perhaps the most beautiful woman in the world and her many loves. True, pointless, unspeakable loves set against the backdrop of Naples. The reception, again, did you ask for another divisive film? Because you got one. Metacritic is at a 58. Letterboxd probably a 2.9. It's kind of all over the place. Ehrlich, clearly not a Sorrentino fan, writes in his 2.5-star review, Sorrentino is back on his proverbial bullshit with another sprawling flesh parade that's more consumed with abstract ideals than it is with the stuff of life itself. Once again, he returns with a rapturously sumptuous film that blurs the lines between the sacred and the profane until sex feels like religion and religion feels like sex, and once again he's compelled by the siren song of youth and great beauty. The film certainly has its fans, however. Sidhant Adlaka for Variety, writing, Parthenope is a film that rumbles with the hum of nostalgia, recapturing the feeling of youthful summer freedom while refusing to shy away from the uncertainties of young adulthood. But it's no mere coming-of-age story. Rather, it's a film about coming to oneself. The film also won the CST Award for Technical Artist. I don't exactly know what that is, but it won it nonetheless. Other premieres in Day 8 included The Village Next to Paradise, September Says, Le Fille, or An Ordinary Case, Olympique La France des Jeux, Being Maria, and the highlights are I'm skipping them. There's nothing super notable among this lineup. Certainly films worth checking out if any of the titles caught your eye, but we're tight on time. This is a long video, so let's move on. Day 9 starts off with Grand Tour. From Portugal, Italy, and France, and directed by Best Director winner Miguel Gomez, this film stars Gonçalo Waddington, Krista Alfaiate, and Claudio da Silva, and many, many more. The film is an art house romantic essayistic travelogue in which a man runs away from marriage and travels through Asia, contemplating his emptiness, while his determined fiancée follows his trail. Full of voiceover narration and striking black and white cinematography, Grand Tour is a poetic narrative of travel and personal reflection. Reception on this is it's an art house film, so unsurprisingly, it's not for everyone. But the reception does lean quite positive as the film's images and ideas sink in. Metacritic sits at a 74, and Letterboxd is closer to a 3.3. Reflecting on some of the mixed responses to the film, Deborah Young writes in her review for The Film Verdict that Gomez is a director poised between ironic narrative and experimentalism, pure and simple. In his films, often described as strange, lyrical, and hypnotizing, divide audiences into the visionaries and the unconvinced. Personally, I am very excited to see this one. The black and white cinematography, just like that I've seen in the still images, is kind of incredible. I've also heard the film compared in style to the work of Chris Marquet, and I do enjoy his work. Sans Soleil is cool, La Jetée is cool. So I'm curious to see more about this one. Definitely excited for it. I think it's one of the ones I'm looking forward to more. It's just something that I think seems, kind of up my alley. So we'll see. Next up, we have Motel Destino from Brazil, France, and Germany, and directed by Karim Enouz, who previously directed Invisible Life. The film stars Iago Xavier, Natalie Rocha, and Fabio Assunção. Motel Destino is a tropical noir set in the Motel Destino. The film follows an unexpected arrival of 21-year-old Geraldo on the run after a botched hit, who disrupts the natural order of the motel and initiates a dance of power and desire between himself and the motel's owners. The film sounds fun, but Metacritic and Letterboxd seem to be on very different pages. Metacritic is at a 73, and Letterboxd is at a 2.7. IndieWire's Ryan Latanzio, scoring the film a B, writes, "It's sexy, disturbing, yet cold despite the simmering equatorial heat and hot lava of freely flowing attractions." Brother Bro agreed, though he was less swayed by the film's style, writing in his 2-star review, "The look and style was there, but the story goes in all the expected directions, revealing little ambition." Other Day 9 premieres included Viet and Nam, Flow, In the Wonderwoods, The Count of Monte Cristo, Spectateur, Jim's Story, Jacques Demy, Le Rose et le Noir, Slocum et moi, and the highlights are Viet and Nam, Flow, and The Count of Monte Cristo. Viet and Nam comes from Vietnam, the Philippines, Singapore, France, Netherlands, Italy, Germany, and the USA. The film was directed by Truong Minh Quế. It may have gone home empty-handed in the Uncertain Regard competition, but the buzz around this one is strong, and I'm personally quite excited for it. The description reads, "In the depths of the underground coal mines, where danger awaits and darkness prevails, Nam and Viet, both young miners, cherish fleeting moments, knowing that one of them will soon leave for a new life across the sea. But the departure cannot happen, as lying somewhere deep within the earth, in the far-off forest, is Nam's father, a soldier, whose remains they're compelled to find. Together, following the mysteries and memories and dreams, they retrace their path to the past." The film sounds lovely, and it reportedly contains a beautifully subdued queer love story that carries out across their search for the past. Robert Daniels, 4.5 stars for RogerEbert.com, writes, "The writer-director Truong Minh Qué's Viet and Nam is absolutely hypnotic. It begins in a coal mine. Viet and Nam are sweaty and exhausted. The pair are secretly lovers. We will return many times to their infatuation and their persistent lovemaking amid the sparkling specks of coal that fill their lungs and their hearts with the same intensity as their love." Often recalling Hiroshima Mon Amour, Quay's lithe script still manages to brim with symbolism, parsing the lasting effects the Vietnam War still has on the country. Flow, from Latvia, France, and Belgium, coming from director Gjons Zilbaludis, a dialogueless animated odyssey following a cat whose home has been devastated by a great flood. After finding refuge with a collection of other animals on a lonesome boat, Cat sails through the overflowed landscape as the animals adapt to their new world. Another film that went home empty-handed, but this has some very strong buzz and just looks fantastically up my alley. Neglia, 4 stars, writes, "Flow is visual storytelling at its finest. Without a single line of dialogue, it delivers an awe-inspiring survival journey through the eyes of a black cat and the animals it encounters across these flooded landscapes. Fluid camera work, beautiful lighting effects, and impressively lifelike movements for its charming characters all create a singular, immersive experience, enhanced by a majestic score." The Count of Monte Cristo comes from France and director Mathieu Delaporte and Alexandre de la Petellier. A new, grandiose adaptation of the famous book in which our protagonist, Edmond Dantes, is framed and arrested on his wedding day, prompting him to plot a grand revenge scheme upon his escape from prison. This is the kind of big-scale filmmaking we haven't seen properly brought to this story before. Deadline's Pete Hammond writes, "The production looks stunning, Matthew Delaporte and Alexandre de la Petellier have made something fresh and exciting from one of the oldest stories around, the kind of movie, quite frankly, Hollywood should be making, in a film that is one of the best I saw in Cannes this year. Day 10, Beating Hearts from France and directed by Guy Lelouch, starring Francois Civil and Adèle Exarchopoulos, is a hyper-stylized and melodramatic criminal romance about two lovers determined to stay together in spite of everything trying to keep them apart. Reception has been strong on Letterboxd but weak on Metacritic, yet another divisive entry into the competition. Metacritic is a 50, while Letterboxd looks like a 3.7 to a 3.8. THR's Jordan Mintzner really truly did not like the film, writing a hodgepodge of movie cliches and overwrought scenes directed with zero tack and plenty of pounding needle drops. Actor-turned-director Lelouch's third stab at the helm is less a disappointment than a serious assault on the viewer's intelligence. On the other end of the spectrum, IndieWire's Arjun Sajip scored it a B+, writing, Lelouch may not be an original, but he is a committed craftsman and an avid synthesizer of forms. And if there's one thing this starry-eyed epic demonstrates, it's that even well-worn genres can be enlivened by sincerity, surprises, and visual punch. All We Imagine as Light is the winner of this year's Grand Prix, or the second place prize in competition. From India, France, the Netherlands, and Luxembourg, and directed by Pial Kapadia, who previously made A Night of Knowing Nothing, the film stars Connie Kusruti, Divya Prabha, Chahaya Kadam, and Hridu Harun. All We Imagine as Light is the first Indian film in competition in 30 years. A drama following a group of roommates who take a trip to a beach town to give themselves space for their desires to manifest. Per Matt Neglia's 4-star review, a tender, enthralling, and intimate film on female desires and insecurities. The reception for this is very strong, quite unanimously. While it ultimately got second place, it received immediate Palme d'Or buzz after deeply moving the audience at Cannes. Metacritic is a 93, I think the highest of the festival, and Letterboxd oddly a bit more muted with what looks like a 3.7 or 3.8, but, still commendable. Siddhant Adlaka, who has been championing the film all week, writes for Joy Sauce in his beautiful review, as a bustling, humming Mumbai either hovers in the backdrop or consumes the frame in its entirety, All We Imagine as Light becomes about the difficulty of loving places and people, and the implications of leaving them. But at its core, it's about the multifaceted nature of Indian women's desires, personal, sexual, emotional, political, and the dynamic ways in which these lived experiences bleed into one another and cross-pollinate between friends and loved ones. I've heard really nothing but good things about this, and I'm incredibly excited to see it. It'll be released later this year by Janus and Sideshow, and I can't wait to watch it. Premieres on day 10 included Nora, Nikki, Nasty, More Than Just Tennis, To Live, To Die, To Live Again, and the highlights are Nora. Nora comes from Saudi Arabia and director Tawfiq Al-Zaidi, winner of the Uncertain Regard Special Mention Prize. Nora is a film about artistic expression and awakening, as set in 90s Saudi Arabia when artistic expression was banned. The titular character has her artistic spirits roused by a painter who enlightens her on the world outside of her tiny community. Critic Darren Mooney wrote on Letterboxd in his 3-star review, really appreciated how understated and restrained Nora was, and how, until its final 10 minutes, it avoids leaning too heavily into melodrama or sentimentality. A gentle, sweet, thoughtful study of how sometimes art escapes the things we can't. Day 11, the final day. We start the day with The Seed of the Sacred Fig, from Iran, Germany, and France, and director Mohammad Rasulov. The film stars Misaj Zar, Sohaila Golestani, Sitare Meleki, Masa Rostami, and many other brave artists. This film is quite remarkable, not just for its subject matter, but for how it ended up here. Director Mohammad Rasulov was sentenced to 8 years in jail after producing this film. His crime? Filmmaking. He was forced to secretly submit the film to Cannes, evident in its bare-bones press page, while fleeing the country in order to make the premiere. When it did premiere, he carried with him pictures of his two lead actors, both of whom were detained back in Iran. This film is all the evidence anyone should need to see that filmmaking and artistic expression can be an inherently political act, an act of defiance, an act of bravery for all involved. Rasulov embodies that, and he put that spirit into this film, which itself, even without all of that, is apparently quite the triumph. A family drama in which a paranoid father imposes drastic measures at home after suspecting his wife and daughters have stolen his gun, causing tensions to rise as Iranian social norms and the rules of family life are brought to a head, all while political protests erupt throughout Iran. Reception, as noted, has been largely positive. It was also awarded a special jury prize by the Cannes competition jury. Metacritic sits at a 81, and Letterboxd is looking like a 4.2. In a succinct evaluation of the film's great political relevance, THR's Jordan Mincer writes, "As Rasulov intercuts real footage and fiction, we realize that what the family is going through is an extension of what the entire country has been facing." I am very excited to see this film. It is deeply commendable as a work of art, as a work of political protest, and I deeply respect everyone involved with it. I'm glad to see Neon has picked it up for US distribution, and the film will be seen by the world. Finally, we have our final competition film, The Most Precious of Cargoes. From France and directed by Oscar-winning Michel Hazanavicius, who directed The Artist, the film stars Jean-Louis Trintignant and Dominique Blanc. This is the sole animated film in competition this year, a feat worth commending. This is a World War II Holocaust drama about a miracle child who, suddenly thrust into the lives of a lonesome couple living in the forest, transforms the lives of all whom she meets. As those around her fight to protect her, the worst and best in the hearts of men come to the surface. The reception, unfortunately, ends Cannes on a disappointingly mixed note. Metacritic is at a 57, and Letterboxd is a bit more forgiving, looking like a 3.3 or 3.4. To end us off with one final Neglia reaction, I am a fan, in case you couldn't tell. On Letterboxd, he gave the film 3.5 stars and writes that the film doesn't have much to say or offer that you haven't already seen before from other World War II Holocaust dramas. Alexander Desplat's gorgeous-sounding music is doing some serious heavy lifting to overcompensate in this regard. For all its darkness and haunting imagery, Michel Hazanavicius ends his fable on a hopeful note, emphasizing the importance of remembering the past to prevent history from repeating itself. Other premieres of the final day were She's Got No Name, which unfortunately was not notable enough for me to dedicate another portion to. And with that, that's Cannes. This was a long video. Oh my god. Thank you very much for sticking around through this whole thing if you're still here. I really appreciate it and would like to shout out all of the amazing work of the critics who covered the festival. You can find more about them in the description and where to find their work. As for this, I'm gonna keep it quick because I feel like I've been talking for a very long time and I'm ready to wrap up this recording session. But thank you for watching. Thank you very much. Please like or subscribe or comment if you enjoyed the video. And I'm going to shut up now.